At what age should we start to introduce children to global issues such as climate change and inequality? I believe that we should start to introduce this as early as possible, and that the best way to do so is through storytelling. Just for today, I've written and illustrated a story to best show how you can do this yourself. Mr. Bridges loved all things creative, and he was thrilled when any of his students had a new idea. He would urge his students to act on their creative impulses, and he was intrigued by their approach to problem solving. He would often describe a great idea as an unstoppable force, similar to the sneeze of a giant. "You must never try to stop it from happening," he would say, "and never let anyone stand in its way. But above all, never underestimate its power." One night, Mr. Bridges lay in bed with worries in his head. Earlier that day, an inquisitive child had asked him about America and its issues with inequality. Yet, as the lesson kept playing in his head, he wondered if he had made them feel divided or afraid to be different. Was there a better way to help his students understand? As he lay there in the darkness, he remembered how Picasso had described children as being born artists. He recalled a TED talk in which Sir Ken Robinson had discussed how children surpassed adults at divergent thinking tasks. Both of these men had recognized that children possessed a certain creative intellect that was usually lost as one grew older. Suddenly, Mr. Bridges had a giant sneeze of an idea. He turned on the sidelight and reached for a piece of paper. He began to draw circles, squares, and triangles, and soon a story began to form. The very next day, Mr. Bridges showed the story to his students. It was about a circle-shaped king who had convinced other circle-shaped people that they were the superior shape, and that triangle and square-shaped people were to be feared. Unsure as to how the story should end, Mr. Bridges decided to leave that to his students. The students understood the concept immediately and came up with multiple endings. What they didn't realize was that they were exploring one of the biggest global issues facing the world today, meanwhile gaining a deeper understanding behind the reasons for inequality. The students presented their ideas in different ways, by drawing comic books, writing stories, and even acting them out. It didn't matter who couldn't spell well or draw properly. They were able to use their own individual strengths to best express their ideas. As Mr. Bridges took the train home that evening, he glanced through a book he had borrowed from the library, The History of Storytelling. He realized that storytelling was rooted somewhere deep in all of us. There was a reason why his students couldn't remember the entire script to the Lego movie, but couldn't remember the 12 numbers that made up the 8 times table. Mr. Bridges realized that storytelling had influenced us in every way. The lady in pink had spent a month's salary on her handbag because of a convincing advert. The lady in black had dedicated her entire life to a book. A few weeks later, Mr. Bridges became captivated by a story which had gained little attention from the mainstream media. In North Dakota, thousands of indigenous and environmental activists have been trying to prevent an oil pipe from being built on indigenous land. He began to record the events through his Shape People characters. Again, his students shared their thoughts and feelings and came up with solutions. He realized that his students would not take sides because the characters didn't look like them. They saw the situation for exactly how it was and was able to distinguish between right and wrong. Mr. Bridges uploaded both of his stories online, now making them free and easily accessible to everyone. Before long, the other teachers were interested in what he was doing, and Shape People became integrated in both maths lessons and language lessons. Mr. Bridges was being asked to share his stories with schools everywhere, in person and via Skype. He started receiving emails from children around the world who had written Shape stories about global issues that they had been affected by. After a while, Mr. Bridges began to write a new story, one that was very close to his heart, but had kept him awake for many nights.
Once there was a square planet. On the square planet live Shape People. Most of the Shape People worked for Mr. Coleman. He was the owner of the biggest coal company on the planet. Every day, the Shape People would go to work where they would dig for coal. It was hard work, but it helped them buy food for their families. The coal was burnt, which made electricity. But the burning coal created a thick, grey, poisonous smog. And so some of the children became very sick. The hospital bills were too expensive for the coal workers. The medical bills kept on piling up. So the coal workers went to ask Mr. Coleman for help. But Mr. Coleman believed that his time was far too valuable. It was easier to pay other people to solve his problems. The coal workers were told that they would not need to worry. Mr. Coleman would make sure only clean coal was burnt. So the Shapes worked longer and harder to earn more money. But it wasn't enough to help their children get better. As time went on, the air had become much worse. The smog traveled all over the planet. More and more Shape People became sick. Not so far away, things had been very different. The Shape People had worked out that energy could come from the sun. This was called solar energy, and it didn't create any pollution. They set up a school to teach other Shape People how it worked. Many Shape People began working and making money. When the king and Mr. Coleman heard about this, they were furious. So Mr. Coleman gave the king a lot of money. The king did whatever he could to stop the people using solar. The news scared the Shape People by telling them that they would soon all lose their jobs. This worried many of the coal worker Shapes. They went to stand up against the solar energy school. Over a short period of time, the smog traveled all over the planet and up into the atmosphere. The carbon dioxide from the coal caused the whole planet to get warmer. This changed the planet's weather and melted its ice. Many of the animals got stuck and could not get to food or safety. The weather would be changed forever, unless they did something now.
As we leave here today, I want you to think about how you might have ended that story. And what if everybody in the room was able to make your ending a reality? Thank you.